Welcome. We have the great honor of doing one of the maybe second to last panel on a long day. So we appreciate you all staying here, but I think it's going to be worth the wait because we have two really extraordinary guests. All the way to my left is Mike Finney, and Mike is the head of the president and CEO of the Maryland Economic Development, Michigan. Woof!
Good catch.
That's a really bad thing to do with the state economic development. Michigan Economic Development, and is going to be able to, how long have you been there?
4 years. I came in with Governor Snyder.
And so if you think about what you've seen and heard about what's happened here, Mike has been from the state level a big part of that, and you're going to hear from him. Also to my left is Don Chen, and Don is the acting director of the Just Cities program at the Ford Foundation. And Don had worked here with the Ford folks and others for a number of years ago, and for the last couple of years has been doing a lot of work in the Global South, and we're going to bring that into the conversation as well. So it should be a really good conversation. Like Gordon said, what we wanted to do was talk about the public sector and really talk about some of the ways that the public sector, more specifically at the local level, has really had some fundamental resets over the last bunch of years, and what those resets mean and what they might mean for the places and the people that you all care about. And when I think about these resets, I think about them in kind of four ways. One is a reset between the city and its relationship to the state and the way the city views the state, and more importantly, maybe from you, Mike, how the state views the city. Another is there's been some real fundamental reset between the relationship between the city and its residents and what that relationship looks like, how that's evolved. And another one that you read in the papers pretty much every day is the relationship between the public sector and its role in addressing poverty and inequality. That's some conversation that we haven't seen at the level around the country and really around the world for years. And then finally, it's this idea of how do we reset the relationship of a city to the mainstream economy? And here, the conversation we've had here about the innovation economy. And so that's what I'd like to talk about and pick your brains, your collective brains on. And Mike, let me start with you, if you don't mind. What have you seen as the role of the state in facilitating this reset at the city level? And what have you seen work?
Sure. I mean, so our challenge is, of course, ensuring that all of our communities in the state, our urban communities in particular, have an opportunity to enjoy this reinvention that our state has been undergoing and to enjoy some of the prosperity of it. And essentially what we've identified are three real significant things that need to be properly aligned in order for that to happen. The first, we have to have talent, right? So if the city of Detroit's going to be successful, it has to have the kind of talent that businesses want.
Right.
You know, in the economic development game, we like to say that talent is the new currency in economic development. You know, at one point it was all about giving away incentives and tax credits and those kind of things. But the reality is today it's all about talent. So if we have it, if our urban communities have it, we can be successful. If they don't, we won't. The second is vibrant. And talent wants to live in vibrant cities. So a lot of what you've been seeing and hearing about here in the city of Detroit, from mid-down to downtown, the whole innovation district that has been described, is about creating a vibrant urban city. And we think we're well on the path to doing that. The Michigan Economic Development Corp is invested in nearly a dozen plus projects, and many of those are under construction right now. And then the third element is one that doesn't often get considered, and that is driving a very strong business-friendly environment so that cities have the ability to be successful. There is this relationship between talent, vibrant communities, and businesses that you can't disconnect. And if you try and disconnect it, it all falls apart. So having a strong business core and creating an environment where businesses can be successful is the third major element that we're focused on. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail right now because of time.
Sure.
But we have very key strategies that's driving all three of those three key areas that we think it takes for cities to be successful. And we think it's the right role for state government to play in supporting cities.
And so what have you seen about what you can do, for example, with the business community that local communities can't really do?
Well, the biggest thing is access.
Yeah.
So at the local level, the city and its resources can easily access local businesses. But when it comes to statewide businesses, national companies, international companies, our ability to gain access is infinitely better. And we see that based on our experiences. We get Governor Snyder on the road all the time.
Right.
He's been to Europe multiple times. He's been to Asia multiple times, Korea, China, Japan. And we've continued that during his entire tenure. The net result of his visits are that businesses are showing up in a significant way, and they're investing in the state of Michigan and investing in the city of Detroit. That kind of access doesn't come easily if it's just the local community trying to gain it, because we can get access to the most senior levels of the business community and the most senior levels within government. And in many other countries, I'll pick China as an example, having strong relationships within government is critical. Having our most senior executive, the governor, participate in our outbound and foreign direct investment missions creates an access opportunity that you can't get at the local level.
And how have you been able to create the relationships so those, with the local level, so those relationships actually funnel down and land here in a place like Detroit?
You know, from the beginning, from the first day that I went to the MEDC, we created what we call our Collaborative Development Council. That only means something to us.
Right.
But essentially, we went to all the major communities throughout the state. And there are 10 what we call prosperity regions. And we identified a regional economic development group in each one of those regions, and we invited them to be part of our advisory team. So every decision that we make, how to invest our limited resources, new programs, projects, we invite them to be a participant and a partner in helping us get it right. So we're really listening to our customers, and we have a few. Our citizenry, our businesses, our economic development partners, they're all key to our ability to be successful. So we try and listen to them and respond to their input.
Interesting. So Don, let me use that. He talked about citizens.
Sure.
And I know that you've spent a lot of time and supported a lot of innovative things around the globe. What have you seen about the change, what's been reset in many places between the government and its citizens, and what results have come from it?
Sure, thanks, Ben. Well, I think that one of the important things to note is that the Ford Foundation's focus is social justice, poverty reduction, and also the democratic processes that really make a strong economy possible. And so if you look at our work in other countries or in the United States, much of our governance work is really focused on improving the interface between cities or local governments and their citizens or other residents. And so if you're looking at a place like Indonesia or South Africa, Colombia, other countries, that is a major set of challenges. And so we're seeing lots of transitions, lots of resets, innovation occurring all over. I think in Detroit, it's really a fascinating case. I would say we're still in the process of resetting. Detroit has had a very rough time with the bankruptcy proceedings and also the disenfranchisement of voters here with local government. I think that a lot of people would agree that the state has really brought a lot of positive changes to the city, but at the same time, we have this very difficult situation with ensuring that people are represented.
Sure.
I learned a startling factoid recently. I think it was written in Next City or perhaps Cityscope, an article that noted that a very large proportion of African American voters and residents in Michigan actually live under financial managers. I think it was something like 3/4 of the total population, which is staggering. So these are challenges that we're really trying to confront. But I think there are some bright prospects ahead. We know that, was it this week or last week, that the state turned over some of the responsibilities for city administration back to the mayor and the city agencies, and I think that's a very positive step as we emerge from the current situation. I think also Detroit is turning a new leaf because now we have a ward system. And so the city council is really determined by more localized leadership and hopefully more organizing and activity and engagement among residents and how the city operates. So that's a very positive step as well. But I think if to reflect on some examples from overseas.
Yeah,
you know,
because what I love is that many people think that the whole world is looking for us,
Yes.
for models of democracy, when in fact there's a lot more innovation happening in places outside of the U.S. So I'd be interested if you could share some of those with us.
Sure. Well, I'll just quote Nelson Mandela, since we're in the moment here.
Perfect.
So if you walk around the corner, about half a mile from here, on Detroit's waterfront, there is a monument to the labor movement that was dedicated in 2002. And there's a quote from Nelson Mandela set in stone right on the waterfront, and it says, "Without justice, there cannot be any economic growth." You know, they have taken that to heart in South Africa and are trying to really promote a socially inclusive strategy. I mean, Nicolette has talked about the housing challenges of that, but if you look at the laws in South Africa, they're really geared towards economic and social inclusion and racial inclusion, which is the issue in South Africa. And there is a lot of innovation in terms of legislation, but we still have a long way to go in terms of implementation. Another example that I like to cite is from Indonesia. There's a relatively small city, a couple million people, called Solo. It's also known as Surakarta. They embarked on one of the most innovative participatory planning and mapping efforts that I've seen in my experience working in the Global South, where they were faced with this challenge of relocating slum dwellers along a river, which is a very common challenge across the Global South. They entered into this participatory process and came out of it with a mutual agreement among residents of the slum. The city actually provided them with money to relocate them, and they chose where to move. They purchased the land. They were able to relocate and then begin their lives and employment and livelihoods and services anew in that location. And it's really become a model for not only Indonesia, but other cities across the South. And I think this participatory spirit is really paying dividends politically. The mayor of that city at the time was later elected governor of Jakarta, and this year he was elected president of Indonesia. So Jokowi is considered a hero in this regard. In Detroit, a number of years ago, we, Ford Foundation, Kresge Foundation, and a number of others supported Detroit Future City. Right. And the hope there was a participatory process. And I think you know that there were over 100,000 opportunities to link with individual people, residents of Detroit, in this planning exercise. And so it identified the baseline data of what the conditions were in neighborhoods. They also identified some of the very specific challenges and some opportunities for how to regrow and perhaps stimulate some of the neighborhoods across Detroit. And that has proven to be a very good exercise, although it's right now stuck in that implementation phase.
Yeah, but let me ask you, what's your reaction as a state person, Mike, to the current state of this effort that really was quite extensive, touched a lot of people, went through a lot of changes. But when you think about investing in Detroit, does that give you, where's that on the confidence level? Does it give you more confidence or less?
Well, I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of customers.
Yeah.
Our cities are clearly customers of the state as well. And so we think that we have to follow their lead to the extent that it is positive, constructive, makes sense, et cetera. And so Detroit Future City, the innovation district that is a subset of Detroit Future City, actually makes a lot of sense to us. Yeah. And so if you look at the strategic support that we're providing to the city of Detroit, it's all following that path very heavily within the innovation district. If you were to go up and down Woodward and a couple blocks off Woodward, you see an awful lot of evidence of the support that the state is providing, in addition to many other partners. Yeah. The new light rail system is a great example. The entertainment district that was announced by the Illich family, a 47 square block area. Who supports that kind of massive development? It's typically small buildings, one-off lots, but in this case, it's a 47 square block area that involves nearly $700 million of public and private investment to create an amazing district. I mean, those are the kind of things that's happening, and it's happening because we actually think the plan that the city has laid out makes an awful lot of sense. Yeah. Obviously, it's going to take some effort to really stay focused on it because it's not inclusive of the entire city. Right. And so that means that some serious decisions will have to be made or choices will have to be made. And as those choices are made, I trust they will be in the best interest of all the people of the city of Detroit as well as of the state of Michigan.
Yeah, and let me pivot a little bit along those lines, though, to talk about poverty and poor people. Because obviously, as a state level or philanthropy, what you want to see is that if Detroit's going to turn around, or as it turns around, that everyone gets to intentionally benefit from that. What do you see, Mike? Let me stay with you for a minute. What do you see of the state's role in helping the city actually address those kinds of intentionally address poverty?
Yeah. Well, poverty leads to crime, leads to violence. I mean, there's just a lot of connectedness between those kinds of social issues. A few years back, I think it was 3 years back, we were looking at crime data. And as it turns out, Michigan had 4 cities in the top 10 in violent crime in the United States. Those 4 cities happened to be 4 of our major urban cores. They were Saginaw, Flint, Pontiac, and Detroit. And so the governor challenged us to come up with a program that was not purely reactive. In other words, it wasn't another program to lock more people up in jail and all the associated things that happen there, but to do something that would be proactive that might create economic prosperity in the face of all the economic decline that was happening. And so we came up with a program that we ultimately call Community Ventures Program. We've demonstrated that we can actually help individuals who are structurally unemployed. And by definition, we say these are folks who have limited employment experience, sometimes limited education, ex-offenders, I mean, you name it, folks who have little or no chance of finding sustainable employment that pays a living wage. And we've been able to demonstrate over the last 2 years that the program has been up and running that we've helped more than 2,500 people find sustainable jobs that pay a living wage. There are no fast food jobs.
Yes.
There are no part-time retail and temporary jobs. These are all full-time jobs with companies like Magna, Detroit Manufacturing Systems, and some 100+ others who have committed to be a part of the program across these entire 4 cities. And just here in Detroit, about 1,300 of the total 2,500 are actually individuals from the city of Detroit. Now, when you start thinking about the challenge that we have in Detroit, we're talking tens of thousands of people. So we've got to figure out how to take this program that's a wonderful model and scale it.
Yep.
And it has some unique characteristics that are very different from the typical workforce training program. We've got a great partner with Pam Moore and Detroit Employment Solutions that have worked with us on it here in the city of Detroit, as well as partners in the other cities also. But it has some unique characteristics where we get to employers first, and we get the employers to make a commitment to take a chance on individuals that they otherwise would probably never see or have access to.
Yeah.
And the employers have said yes in a very big way. And now we've been working with a lot of partners to feed a pipeline of individuals who then we provide a lot of wraparound support to, so they can not only get the job, but they can stay employed. So 2.5 years into it, we've got over 2,500 people working and about a 70+% retention rate. And the average wage is about $12 an hour. Not a lot of money,
Right.
but when you hear this national debate about a minimum wage, $12 an hour is significantly better.
Yeah, and the money that you're putting into that, is that coming from, where's that coming from?
Well, in this case, because it was a pilot program, it ended up being state general fund dollars.
Yeah.
And our deal with the governor is that we had one key metric.
Yeah.
For every $10,000, there had to be one job, minimal.
Yeah.
So we received $10 million in each of the last 2 years. So obviously doing the math, that's 2,000 jobs. We actually ended up with 2,500. So we did a little bit better than one job per 10,000. The reality is we would love to have a much larger pool of money. If we're going to help tens of thousands of people get jobs, the math is pretty straightforward. If we want to help 50 or 5,000 people, we need $50 million.
Right.
And that's where I think some of the other partners that we have can really play a role. The federal government can certainly play a role. A lot of workforce dollars come into our state. Finding more creative ways to use that money is important. The foundation community that's been very generous in this city and in other cities across the country, very generous. They can also play a role in helping to seed the program. Those are the kind of resources that it takes.
That makes sense. Let me take 3 more minutes and talk about one more issue, and then open it up if people have any questions.
Can I talk about that too?
I was going to go to you. Please, Tom.
Okay, good. That's terrific. So I've been very impressed with what the state has done in this area. And also, you heard Matt Cullen talk a couple nights ago about the work that Rock Ventures and other private employers are doing. I think that these are excellent steps forward. One of the challenges is that the city of Detroit is not necessarily benefiting yet. We're on a cusp of doing that. And one of the things that we learned through the Detroit Future City process was that Detroit has the lowest ratio of jobs to residents in the entire country among big cities. It's 27 jobs per 100 residents. And so we got to get that number up. One of the key things that we've been promoting in a variety of venues is the notion that Detroit needs jobs far more than it needs more people. And so, when people hear about the depopulation of Detroit, they automatically think we need more residents. Actually, we need more jobs. I think that one of the really promising areas has been some of the work that the state has done. Also, there's a collaborative here in Michigan, in Southeast Michigan, called the New Economy Initiative, which is a philanthropic collaboration. So this is where you have quite a few foundations cooperating to try to stimulate different economic sectors in the region. And they are just about to announce a set of awardees for a competition that they held recently. It's called E-Ideas. And so it'll focus on small business support, awarding entrepreneurship, and those types of things. And it's a very exciting development, and I hope it really blossoms into
Good.
more of that.
I want to talk more about philanthropy's role in this at the state and the local level, but let me see if anybody wants to ask these folks a question. Please.
Don Borat with Cityscope. One of the actors that hasn't been identified here that I think is important is something called the Michigan Municipal League.
Okay.
Headed by a guy named Dan Gilmartin. It's probably one of the most innovative leagues in the country. And what is relevant here is that the league, which represents all the cities in the state, recognized if Detroit failed, the state would fail. And so it, as an organization, has tried to find ways of helping collectively the interests of Detroit in order to benefit the cities across the state. And I think that is a significant initiative which is deserving of some kind of acknowledgement.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, feel free to go up to the mic. Let me ask you about philanthropy. What do you think, Don, what do you think the most effective role of philanthropy is in working at a city level, like Detroit or some other?
Well, I think there are many roles, but if you were to ask me to identify one strategy, I think one of the overlooked strategies so far is really figuring out how to connect Detroit's economy with the regional economy. The regional economy here is actually the fourth biggest in the country.
Right.
And $1.7 billion worth of goods and services go over the Ambassador Bridge every year, and so there's a tremendous amount of wealth, tremendous amount of jobs, and there needs to be more mechanisms to really tap into that. And as a result of the current disconnect, about 61% of Detroiters actually work outside the city.
Right.
Only about 30% of them live and work here in the city, and so there's a really important set of things to do with regard to linking that. And one of the things that foundations have started to do is to support advocacy around a regional transit system, so that people in the city can get to jobs in the region. You can have more access and better connectivity between suburban locations and nearby cities and the city of Detroit. And I think that's going to be one of the next things that we tackle after M1 Rail starts to run and we have a revitalization of downtown and midtown.
Interesting. And Mike, what would you say you've seen as the most helpful interventions or supports from philanthropy, Michigan writ large or Detroit or both?
Well, a number of the large-scale projects that are underway, I referenced the light rail system, probably would not have happened but for philanthropy.
Right.
Frankly, helping the city with its bankruptcy. Saving the Detroit Institute of Arts probably would not have happened but for philanthropy. And those are important assets for this city to have. Don referenced the New Economy Initiative, a very important economic development resource that was put in place 5 or 6 years ago that I think the story is not fully told yet in terms of its long-term impact.
Sure.
But certainly it was a lot of resources that were designed to have big impact, and the initiative that Don described of the is it MI Ideas or?
NE
NE
Ideas.
NE Ideas will certainly help a number of small companies here in the not too distant future. One of the opportunities, I think, is for even larger scale public-private partnerships. The foundation community probably has one of the largest pools of discretionary resources that can be deployed to help impact local communities. And partnering with state government, local government, and other private companies to figure out how to strategically have large-scale impact is a very good thing, and I would encourage more of it.
We have a couple minutes left. Let me ask you guys to say, what do you see as the most promising thing happening in cities today, here or otherwise?
Well, I can take a stab at that.
Please do.
And I'm going to go a little outside the box here and go to the global level.
Okay, good.
So everybody knows that cities are hot, right? There's a lot more attention on cities, and people are focused on innovation. For the first time ever, the United Nations is really thinking about how to empower local authorities, mayors, other local officials, even civil society groups. And so within what's being negotiated right now, the Sustainable Development Goals for every country, there is a cities and human settlements goal. It's never happened before. It'll be a set of performance metrics and targets to really try to accomplish some development goals, poverty reduction, and sustainability goals. So I think that's very exciting. It'll be baked next year, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it sounds like that's going to need a fair amount of support as well to actually make happen. Mike.
I'm excited that young people want to move into urban cities again. I mean, to me, that's just the coolest thing.
Right.
When I walk the streets of Detroit now, nothing but multicultural, multi-ethnic individuals, and most of them are young enough to be my children, perhaps my grandchildren.
Yes.
And it's very exciting to see that. And when you stop and talk to them, they talk about the excitement of being in the city and all that it has to offer. And so many of us who moved to the suburbs over the years kind of forgot that. You know, I grew up in Flint. I grew up right in the heart of Flint on Industrial and Leaf Street. My dad walked to work every day at Buick City.
That's amazing.
It was a cool thing. All of my neighbors, I walked. I live in a neighborhood now where I only know a handful of my neighbors. For the neighborhood I grew up in, not only did I know all the neighbors, they also spanked my butt if I got out of line. And so I think those are the kinds of things that are exciting now about young people coming back to our cities and helping to redevelop them. And hopefully that'll lead to long-term prosperity for cities like Detroit and Flint and so many others.
That's the last word. I want to join me in thanking the panelists here.
Good job. Good job.